A new report from Building Research Establishment reveals that poor housing in the UK is costing the NHS 1.4 billion a year, with a further 2.6 million homes in England categorized as poor quality and potentially hazardous to those occupying them. York is one of the most expensive cities in the United Kingdom to rent in. There is a shortage of affordable housing. In September, Labour Group Deputy Leader, Councillor Claire Douglas told media, "I represent Heworth residents, and some of the casework I receive linked to substandard or overcrowded council housing is heartbreaking." Today, I will be talking to Labour's housing spokesperson, Councillor Michael Pavlovic. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, William, and welcome to you, and welcome to all your viewers. Yes, and thank you for that very accurate introduction. I am Michael Pavlovic. I've been representing the Hull Road ward in the city since 2017, and I'm the Labour opposition spokesperson for housing and safer communities. As you've quite rightly pointed out, William, the fault of housing in the city at the moment is the responsibility of the ruling administration, and that is the Liberal Democrat Green coalition. I'm a member of the official opposition, and so obviously anything I say is from a position of not being able to currently develop or implement policy. But in respect of housing standards, and you've made reference to housing standards, and you're quite correct, it's not just Councillor Douglas in Heworth ward. All councillors where there are council house stock are also receiving emails on a daily, weekly basis regarding the quality of their accommodation. There's also significant issues, it has to be said, within the private rented sector. And landlords have a responsibility, no matter whether they're in the private sector or in the statutory sector, to make sure that the accommodation that they provide is decent and fit to live in. And unfortunately, in all too many cases within City of York Council's housing stock, that's not the case. We've seen in recent months many properties in which repairs are taking far too long to be delivered, and to be delivered at a standard that is satisfactory. And as Labour member for housing, I've been challenging both the council officers and the politicians, and saying that that has to improve. This is not a satisfactory state of affairs, and council tenants cannot be treated as second-class citizens in this city. So one of the things that I've been doing is trying to work out with officers how they can improve the time delays in repairs coming through. They say, and quite rightly so, that the pandemic has been a significant factor, that staff have been isolating, but there's also the decisions that have been made by politicians, and officers can only deliver when they have the tools to deliver that with. And we criticised quite considerably the February budget, which chose to reduce the amount of funding for housing repairs by over £250,000, a total in repairs across the board of over £400,000 this year. At a time when residents were coming to the council to complain to councillors and through the council itself about delays in repairs, that was not, in our view, the sensible option to have taken. And we challenged the administration to adequately resource it. We've also challenged the politicians at executive meetings, and you may recall at full council, I quite robustly challenged, and she was markedly unhappy with saying, you know, the bottom line lies with you. You are the executive member for housing. It is under your direction that this failure has developed, and it's for you to find solutions for it. And warm words saying, yes, we understand things are difficult. Yes, we understand people are living in conditions that they should not be having to live in. Do not address the fundamental problem, which is that unless you resource housing repairs appropriately, you will continue to have delays. Unless you invest in the workforce that can deliver that, and the council is facing significant gaps in skilled trades, and they haven't been filling vacancies. I think they're now starting to do that, but of course, at the same time, we've lost a number of experienced staff, and that is creating a skills gap that is then translating through to repairs. And that is where the problems have arisen. There is a time scale by which repairs are supposed to be done, and that's been lost. That 20-day repair target is now 3 months or more, and that's not acceptable. So in a nutshell, my job is to continue to challenge the politicians, to say that they need to invest, to say that they need to take decent human standards of accommodation seriously, and to give the teams, the housing repairs teams, the tools by which, and when I say tools, I mean the resource tools, not the physical tools, to be able to do their job as they want to do. Nobody wants to have to be telling a family with children that they're cutting their water off for 5 days because they haven't got the parts. Nobody wants to be telling people that the mold that they've got because of the damp in their properties can't be repaired for months. So the direction has to come from politicians, William. I firmly believe that. And when Labour come into power in 2023, as hopefully that will happen, we will invest in housing repairs. We will make sure that houses are warm, decent, and of a standard that the residents should expect. Because these are families, these are individuals, these are young children whose health conditions are being exacerbated by the damp and the conditions that they're living in. That's not an acceptable scenario for anybody, and should have had a much higher priority than it has had. My view is that the executive member has taken her eye off the ball. and been focusing rather on building passive houses, when there are nearly 1,000 homes of the 7,500 homes, council homes that are in the city, that are classed as being non-decent. And they say, well, we've changed the criteria by which we measure decency. But these are bathrooms that are old. These are kitchens that are old. This is wiring that's not satisfactory. These are trip and fall hazards. You know, these are really significant features that people who rent their properties should have within their homes. So that's basically what I wanted to say about housing repairs. I don't know if you've got any questions that have arisen from what I've said that you'd like to follow up on with me.
So what are you going to say to someone who is listening to or watching to this interview and waiting in housing waiting list for years? Maybe they're living in a sofa with their parents or their relatives, and they're desperate. It's too expensive to rent a house, and they don't know when they're going to be housed. They don't know what they're going to do. They can't buy a house. It's too much. They're working class people. They're working hard day and night. So that's one. And the other thing is, can you give some practical example without naming anyone that you help people with poor quality of housing? And how are you going to bring the change without raising the council tax in the future, and from where the money will come? That's the question. Thank you.
So there's two questions there, and both of them are incredibly important. One's the gap in the housing affordability and the crisis that exists in York for both people wanting to rent and people who are in a position or would normally be in a position to buy, but also in respect of housing standards. So just the other day, you were asking a practical example of when a councillor can intervene, and in this case it was me, but you know, all of my colleagues are intervening on a regular basis. A chap wrote to me about his bathroom, and that had a significant leak and a leak in the toilet, and he'd been chasing the councils for, I think when he first contacted me, it was nearly 2 months. As soon as I received this, I rang the housing repairs, and that's another issue. I mean, I don't have a hotline to the council officers. I ring the helpline just like everybody else, and so I can experience some of the pain that people go through. I was waiting for over 20 minutes to get put through, but I raised it and I said, you know, this is a situation and this is the house, this is the address, and was told, yes, we did have it logged, but we didn't have it logged as a leak. It's an urgent issue. We'll get a plumber out within 4 hours. So I was able to get back to the constituent and say, yeah, there will be an emergency plumber coming out today. And that happened, only to then subsequently be told, actually, the whole pipework needs to be replaced. And I've been given a date 2 months in advance for that to happen. So I was able to then go back and say, you know, the problem is that this hasn't been resolved. And the month, you know, there's a 2 month delay. And whilst it's not for me to say you need to prioritise this case because I'm a councillor and I'm shouting the loudest, because every tenant should have the right, whether they go to a councillor or whether they don't go to a councillor, to have a repair done in a timely manner. You know, they did go back out to reassess that property, and you know, without going into a lot of detail, that tenant now has a new bathroom and new pipework, and it took a period of time. I won't dispute it, but they are now in decent conditions, and you know, they that you know, we're now happy that this work has been done. And that's the type of casework that councillors get involved in, day in, day out, and that's what we're paid for. And that's, you know, that's what we were elected to do, to represent our tenants, not just in our own wards, but also across the city. When there are systemic problems that are arising, it's our job to flag those up and to flag them up publicly when necessary. And you may recall that I brought it up at executive, I brought it up in housing scrutiny, I brought it up in full council. And bringing it to a public face, I put out a press release, which the press took up. You know, that's the type of activism, if you like, that both tenants and residents should be able to do. So that was one piece of practical casework just over the last few weeks. You know, I've been working with my colleagues, because I'm obviously the housing spokesperson, and saying to them, please send me reports that you get from your own residents, and you know, and I will compile a database that I can then go back to senior managers and assistant directors and say, look, you know, I've got these examples of cases across the city. This is the type of issue that's going on, and it's been going on for months and months and months. And, you know, tell me what you need, and I will put the pressure on the politicians. You know, I will agitate for more. So you were also talking about where the funding for this comes from. Funding for housing repairs comes from the housing revenue account, not from the general fund. The housing revenue account sits separately to the general fund, which is raised through council tax. And it comes basically from the rents that tenants pay, and the service charges that tenants pay, and it's held in a separate account, and all repairs come out of and maintenance come out of the housing revenue account. The housing revenue account, I could go into a lot of technical detail about its debt and its debt cap. It used to be held by the government. The government then transferred it back into the responsibility of the local authorities in 2012. And they have to now take on that government, that debt which was once held by central government is now held by the local authority. And that means that it has to pay interest on the debt that was transferred to it. So that's one of the calculations that the accountants within City of York Council have to make, is how much money can we put into repairs, and how much money can we allocate to house building. And that then comes on to the next point that you raised, which was not just homelessness, but for those people that are on the housing waiting list, that are in unsuitable accommodation, or that need a house move on, that need an adapted property. And we've seen the housing waiting list shoot up through the roof in the past 3 years. And the number of people that are classed as being in the highest priority is over 700 now. These are people that are in what the council call gold band, or priority 1 need for accommodation. And the housing availability isn't going to come close to housing those 600 top priority gold band tenants. And whether you're, I've spent the vast bulk of my working life working with people that are in insecure accommodation. For 16 years, I was a probation officer working with many homeless people. Then I moved to be the chief executive of a homeless accommodation provider. So, this is a topic that I know a great deal about, and I've had a great deal of experience in working with the most vulnerable people within this city. And I recognise that their situation is not improving, it's actually getting worse. And the housing market in York, and there was an article, you may or may not have seen it today, I don't know when this is going out, but it's Monday the 22nd of November today, in The Guardian, saying that in York, you're talking about over 8.5 times people's average incomes to be able to afford a home, and for rental it's over 9 times. That's the scale of the situation that we face in York, and people are paying the vast bulk of their wages in rent, in private rent, because there's not enough council properties and not enough social housing being made available. And this is where I've got a significant issue with the housing delivery programme that the council have adopted since 2018. I complained about it in 2018. I've complained about it every year and every month since. The council say that they're embarking on their biggest house building programme since the 1970s. I think it's the 1970s. I may be wrong on that, but certainly for many, many years. And on the face of it, 600 homes over 5 years sounds fantastic, and certainly a big improvement on where we've been in recent years, until you then start to break that down. Those 600 houses, 60% of them are being sold at full market price. So they're not meeting the need of the housing waiting list. They're not meeting the needs of the homeless. They're not meeting the needs of street sleepers or sofa servants. They're meeting the needs of people who could already afford to buy from a private developer. And this is the council, the City of York Council, on its own very scarce plots of land, saying we are acting as a private developer. And what they're actually delivering is 20% social rented, and that's council housing. So the issue that you were talking about, those people, those nearly 700 people on the housing waiting list, the people that are on the streets, the people that are sofa surfing in insecure accommodation. You're talking about 120 properties over a 5-6 year period, and that's going to drag. That 5 years is that 5 years has got absolutely no chance of being met. When they're losing more than that through right to buy. So people are buying their council houses at huge discounts, and that's a different topic. And you know, we may one day have a conversation about right to buy, but you're losing more through right to buy than you're delivering through your housing delivery program. So at the end of 5 years, you actually end up with less council housing than you had when you started. That for me is fundamentally wrong. And what the council needs to have a policy of is creating far more social housing than it is doing. Whether it does it itself or whether it does it in partnership with housing associations, that is the difference between the Labour position and the Lib Dems and the Greens.
The final question. Is there anything you want to thank Lib Dem and Green coalition for their achievements in housing sector that they have achieved in last years?
Well, I've pointed out there are many failings. There are individuals that are willing to consider alternatives. And you know, and I do point to Councillor Fenton, who is the chair of Housing Scrutiny. I'm the vice chair of Housing Scrutiny. He and I undertook a piece of research into affordable housing, and we will be bringing that to the executive in December. No, in January now. It's been moved from December. It was supposed to be in October, then it was supposed to be in November, then it was supposed to be in December. Now it's going to January, and that is asking the council to have a radical rethink. And also, he and I are about to undertake another piece of in-depth research into council housing policies and whether they discriminate against individuals with protected characteristics. And he's been very willing to challenge the orthodoxy of how the council operates. So, you know, credit where it's due. You know, unfortunately, he's not on the executive. Unfortunately, he's not able to influence the funding decisions. But no, I feel that this administration has let down the people of York, and I can't sugarcoat it, William, I'm afraid. You know, in my view, as the opposition spokesperson, they have sadly neglected their responsibilities to the people of York.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
No, and thank you.
Thank you.
It's a great pleasure, and you know, I very much hope to be able to talk with you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.